On a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. Cars honked on busy streets, people hurried along sidewalks clutching coffee cups or shopping bags, and the warm California sun cast golden light over everything it touched. Amid this everyday chaos, Keanu Reeves walked out of a small cafe tucked between two larger buildings. He had just finished grabbing a quick lunch, a simple sandwich and a cup of tea. Dressed casually in jeans, sneakers, and a plain t-shirt, he blended easily into the crowd despite being one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. As Keanu stepped outside, his attention was drawn to an unusual sight across the street. An elderly man, frail and bent with age, was struggling to push several shopping carts toward a grocery store entrance. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the handles, but his movements were deliberate, almost mechanical. Each step seemed like an effort, yet he didn't stop. Every time one cart reached the collection bay, he turned back to retrieve another, repeating the process again and again without complaint. Keanu paused, intrigued. Something about the scene felt different. There was a quiet determination in the old man's actions that caught Keanu's eye. Most people would have walked past without giving it much thought, dismissing it as someone doing their job. But Keanu wasn't like most people. Known for his kindness and thoughtfulness, he often noticed details others overlooked. Today was no exception. Curiosity tugged at him, so instead of continuing on his way, Keanu crossed the street. As he approached, he saw more clearly how worn down the man looked. His clothes were clean but faded, patched together in places where fabric had begun to fray. His shoes were scuffed and his face carried deep lines etched by years of hard work and life's challenges. Yet there was a certain dignity in the way he carried himself, even as sweat glistened on his forehead under the bright sun. "Excuse me," Keanu said softly, stepping closer. The man stopped mid-motion, surprised to see someone addressing him. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes before recognition settled in. He knew who Keanu was, of course. Everyone did. But rather than feeling intimidated or starstruck, the man simply smiled warmly. "Can I help you?" the elderly man asked, his voice steady despite its slight rasp. There was no hint of resentment or frustration in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "I was just wondering." "What are you doing here?" Keanu replied, gesturing toward the carts. It wasn't an accusation or judgment. It was a sincere question, born out of concern. The man chuckled lightly, leaning against one of the carts as if taking a brief rest. "Oh, this? I collect these carts for the store. They pay me a little bit for each one I bring back. It helps me get by." Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "How long have you been doing this?" "Years now," the man answered, matter-of-factly. "Long enough that it feels like second nature. I don't mind it, though. Keeps me moving, keeps me busy." There was something humble yet profound in the way he spoke. No bitterness, no complaints, just acceptance. Keanu found himself wanting to know more. Who was this man? What brought him to this point in his life? Why was he working so hard at such an advanced age? "My name's Keanu," he said, extending his hand. The man hesitated for a split second before shaking it firmly. "Harold," he replied. "Nice to meet you." They stood there for a while longer, exchanging pleasantries. Harold explained that he lived nearby in a modest apartment. He worked odd jobs when he could, but collecting carts had become his primary source of income. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it paid just enough to keep food on the table and cover basic expenses. Keanu listened intently, nodding occasionally as Harold spoke. Despite the casualness of their conversation, Keanu couldn't ignore the weight of what he was hearing. Here was a man in his 90s, still laboring tirelessly every day just to survive. And yet, Harold didn't seem defeated. If anything, there was a quiet strength in his demeanor, a resilience that spoke volumes about the kind of person he was. Before parting ways, Keanu thanked Harold for sharing his story. "Take care of yourself," he said earnestly, offering a final handshake. Harold smiled again, his expression soft and grateful. As Keanu walked away, He couldn't shake the image of Harold pushing those heavy carts under the relentless sun. Something about it lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. He knew he couldn't walk away and forget about it. This encounter wasn't just a random moment. It was the beginning of something bigger. Little did Harold, or anyone else, know. Keanu was already thinking about what he could do to make a difference. The next day, Keanu returned to the same spot near the grocery store, this time with a purpose. He wasn't there by chance. He wanted to learn more about Harold. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench under the shade of a tree, Keanu waited patiently as Harold arrived, just like clockwork, ready to begin his daily routine of collecting stray shopping carts. When Harold noticed Keanu sitting nearby, he gave him a polite nod and a small smile before starting his work. Keanu didn't waste time. As soon as Harold finished bringing in the first round of carts, he walked over and gestured toward the empty space beside him on the bench. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" he asked warmly. Harold wiped his brow with the back of his hand and chuckled. "Sure. Why not? It's nice to have company." He sat down heavily, letting out a soft sigh as he stretched his legs. Though tired, Harold seemed content, even peaceful, despite the obvious toll the physical labor took on his body. For the next hour, they talked. At first, their conversation was light, comments about the weather, the neighborhood, and how busy the streets had become over the years. But slowly, Keanu steered the discussion toward Harold's life. He asked questions gently, careful not to pry too deeply or make Harold uncomfortable. What started as casual chit-chat soon turned into something far more meaningful. Harold began sharing pieces of his story, opening up in a way that surprised even himself. He told Keanu about his childhood growing up during the Great Depression, when times were tough but families stuck together through thick and thin. His parents worked tirelessly to provide for him and his siblings, instilling values of hard work, honesty, and gratitude that stayed with Harold throughout his life. "I've always believed in earning your keep," Harold said thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Even now, at my age, I don't feel right sitting around doing nothing. If I can still contribute, even in a small way, then I'll do it." Keanu nodded, absorbing every word. "That's admirable," he said, sincerely. "Not everyone has that kind of drive," Harold shrugged modestly. "It's not about being special or anything, it's just, what else am I supposed to do? Life doesn't stop because you get older." As the conversation continued, Harold revealed more about his personal struggles. He spoke of losing his wife decades ago after a long battle with illness, a loss that left a void in his heart he'd never fully filled. Their marriage had been a happy one, filled with laughter, love, and shared dreams. But after she passed, Harold found himself navigating life alone, leaning on memories to keep him going. Their children, he explained, had drifted apart over the years. Misunderstandings and disagreements led to estrangement, leaving Harold without much contact from them. While it clearly pained him to talk about it, Harold didn't dwell on bitterness. Instead, he focused on the positive aspects of his life, the friendships he'd formed, the books he loved reading, and the simple pleasures of watching the sunrise each morning. "I used to think I needed other people to survive," Harold admitted, his voice tinged with reflection. "But now I realize that sometimes all you really need is yourself. You learn to adapt, to find joy in the little things. Like pushing these carts. It may not seem like much, but it gives me a reason to get up in the morning." Keanu listened intently, his heart swelling with admiration for this remarkable man. Despite everything Harold had endured, the loss of loved ones, financial hardships, loneliness, he remained resilient. There was no trace of self-pity in his words, only quiet strength and acceptance. It was humbling to witness. At one point, Keanu asked, "Do you ever wish things could be different? For instance, wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about money or where your next meal is coming from?" Harold chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Of course, I'd love that. Who wouldn't? But wishing doesn't change anything. I've learned to take life as it comes. Some days are harder than others, sure, but I try to focus on what I can control. And right now, that's this." He gestured toward the carts lined up neatly near the store entrance. Keanu smiled, though his mind raced with thoughts. He couldn't help but wonder how many others like Harold existed, people who worked tirelessly just to scrape by, often unnoticed by society. How many seniors struggled silently, unable to ask for help because pride or circumstances held them back. The realization weighed heavily on him, sparking a mix of emotions, sadness, frustration, and above all, determination. Before saying goodbye, Keanu thanked Harold once again for sharing his story. "You're an incredible person, Harold," he said earnestly. "I hope you know that." Harold looked at him, slightly taken aback by the compliment. "Me? Nah, I'm just an old man trying to get by, nothing special about that." But Keanu disagreed. To him, Harold represented something extraordinary, a testament to human endurance and grace in the face of adversity. As he walked away, Keanu knew he couldn't leave things as they were. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter, it was a call to action. Harold's story deserved more than sympathy. It deserved change. That evening, as Keanu sat in his home reflecting on the day's events, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He replayed Harold's words in his mind, each sentence reinforcing his resolve. Tomorrow, he decided, he would return, not just to listen but to act. Whatever it took, Keanu vowed to make a difference in Harold's life. After all, Harold had already given him something invaluable: inspiration. The following morning, Keanu woke up early, his mind already racing with ideas. He couldn't shake the image of Harold pushing those heavy carts under the relentless sun, nor could he forget the quiet dignity with which Harold spoke about his struggles. It wasn't just about helping Harold survive. It was about giving him a life worth living, one where he didn't have to worry about basic necessities or feel like a burden to anyone. Keanu knew he had the means to make a significant difference, but he also understood that throwing money at the problem wouldn't be enough. What Harold needed wasn't charity, it was stability, security, and respect. And so Keanu began to think creatively, considering every possible way he could improve Harold's situation in a lasting and meaningful manner. By mid-morning, Keanu arrived back at the grocery store, this time dressed in slightly more formal attire, a subtle nod to the seriousness of what he was about to do. He parked his car a block away, preferring to approach on foot so as not to draw unnecessary attention. As expected, Harold was already hard at work, collecting stray carts scattered around the parking lot. When Harold noticed Keanu approaching, he stopped briefly, leaning against a cart to catch his breath. "Back again?" Harold asked with a warm smile, though there was a hint of surprise in his voice. "You're persistent, I'll give you that." Keanu grinned, trying to keep the mood light despite the weight of what he was about to say. "I told you I'd be back. But today, I've got something important to talk about." Harold raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What's that?" Instead of answering immediately, Keanu gestured toward a nearby bench. "Let's sit down for a minute. This might take a while." Harold hesitated for a moment, glancing at the pile of carts he still needed to collect. Then, seeing the earnest look on Keanu's face, he nodded and followed him to the bench. Once they were seated, Keanu took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Harold," he began, his tone steady and sincere, "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday, about everything you've shared. Your life, your struggles, your resilience, and I want to help. Not just in a small way, but in a way that changes things for you permanently." Harold blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Help? What do you mean?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, making sure Harold could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I mean, I want to buy you a home, a place where you can live comfortably without worrying about rent or bills or anything else. Somewhere safe and secure where you can spend your days however you choose." For a long moment, Harold simply stared at him, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. Then slowly he shook his head. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's too much. I can't accept something like that." "Yes, you can," Keanu replied firmly, though kindly. "And you will. Hear me out, okay? This isn't about pity or charity. It's about recognizing your strength and honoring it. You've worked so hard your entire life, Harold. You deserve to live with dignity and peace, especially now. Harold looked away, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. But why would you do this for me? We barely know each other. Keanu smiled softly, shrugging modestly. Because meeting you reminded me of what truly matters in life. Kindness, resilience, gratitude. You embody all those things, Harold, and I want to make sure you never have to struggle again. Besides, I believe in paying it forward. If someone had done this for my family when I was growing up, it would have made all the difference. Tears welled up in Harold's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away, embarrassed by the display of emotion. I don't even know what to say, he admitted, his voice thick with gratitude. No one's ever done anything like this for me before. You don't have to say anything right now, Keanu assured him gently. Just let me handle the details. I'll find a place close by, somewhere you'll feel at home, and I'll make sure you're taken care of, not just financially but in every way possible. You won't be alone anymore, Harold, I promise. Harold swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the generosity of the offer. I don't know how to thank you, he finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. This is unbelievable. There's no need to thank me, Keanu said with a reassuring smile. Just promise me one thing. When you move into your new home, you'll continue doing the things that bring you joy, whether that's reading books, watching sunrises, or yes, even collecting carts if it makes you happy. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about giving you the freedom to live your best life. Harold nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face now. I promise, he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. With that, Keanu stood up, extending a hand to Harold. Then let's get started. Today's the first day of a brand new chapter for you. As they walked back toward the grocery store, Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be logistics to figure out, arrangements to make, and adjustments for Harold to adapt to. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the spark of hope he saw in Harold's eyes, the renewed sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. Later that afternoon, Keanu made a series of phone calls, reaching out to real estate agents, financial advisors, and local community organizations. He wanted to ensure that every aspect of Harold's transition was handled with care and precision. By the end of the day, he had already identified several potential homes within Harold's preferred area and arranged for a caregiver to assist him during the move. Though Keanu kept his plans low-key, word of his actions began to spread among the staff at the grocery store. Employees who had known Harold for years marveled at the kindness being shown to him, many expressing their own gratitude for Keanu's selflessness. One cashier, moved to tears, handed Keanu a note that read, "Thank you for reminding us that good people still exist in this world." As night fell, Keanu sat quietly in his home, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about Harold, the man who had inspired him to act, and felt a deep sense of purpose. Helping Harold wasn't just about changing one person's life. It was about setting an example for others to follow. In a world often clouded by negativity, acts of kindness could shine like a beacon, inspiring countless others to do the same. Little did Keanu know, his decision to help Harold would soon ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. But for now, he focused on the task at hand, determined to see Harold settled into a brighter future. After all, true change begins with a single step, and Keanu had already taken his. Over the next few weeks, Keanu threw himself into making Harold's new life a reality. He worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with real estate agents, interior designers, and community organizations to ensure every detail was perfect. It wasn't just about finding a house, it was about creating a home, a place where Harold could feel safe, comfortable, and truly at peace. Keanu started by narrowing down the list of potential homes to 3 options, all within walking distance of the grocery store where Harold had spent so many years working. Each property was modest but charming, with cozy living spaces, sunny windows, and small gardens that reminded Harold of the backyard he used to tend decades ago. Keanu insisted on keeping things simple. After all, Harold didn't need anything extravagant, just something functional and warm. When it came time for Harold to see the houses, Keanu picked him up in his car early one morning. Harold looked nervous as they drove through the neighborhood, clutching the door handle tightly. "I still can't believe this is happening," Harold muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "You'll see," Keanu said with an encouraging smile. "It's going to be great." The first house they visited was quaint, with pale blue shutters and flower boxes hanging under the windows. The second had a spacious porch where Harold imagined sitting with a cup of coffee on lazy mornings. But it was the third house, a little yellow bungalow with a red front door, that stole Harold's heart. As soon as he stepped inside, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The rooms were bright and airy, the kitchen was fully stocked with modern appliances, and the backyard featured a patch of grass perfect for planting herbs or flowers. "This is it?" Harold whispered, running his hand along the edge of the wooden dining table. "This feels like home." Keanu grinned, clearly pleased with Harold's reaction. Then it settled. "Welcome to your new house, Harold." But Keanu didn't stop there. Knowing how important independence was to Harold, he arranged for a monthly stipend to cover groceries, medical expenses, and other necessities. He also hired a team of caregivers who would visit regularly, not to hover over Harold, but to check in, assist with any tasks he might find challenging, and simply keep him company. Keanu wanted Harold to feel supported without feeling smothered. Further ease Harold's transition, Keanu introduced him to local senior groups and community centers. At first, Harold was hesitant, unsure if he'd fit in with people he didn't know. But Keanu reassured him, saying, "You never know. You might make some lifelong friends. And besides, everyone loves a good story. You've got plenty of those." True. To Keanu's prediction, Harold quickly became a beloved figure in the community. His tales of growing up during the Great Depression, his insights into resilience, and his gentle humor captivated everyone he met. People began inviting him to potlucks, book clubs, and even gardening workshops. For the first time in years, Harold found himself surrounded by laughter and camaraderie, rediscovering the joy of connection. Meanwhile, Keanu quietly continued to support Harold in ways both big and small. He sent over stacks of books he thought Harold might enjoy, knowing how much the older man loved reading. On weekends, Keanu would drop by unannounced, bringing homemade meals or offering to help with errands. Their friendship deepened, built not on celebrity status or wealth, but on mutual respect and genuine care. Word of Keanu's generosity eventually spread beyond the immediate circle of friends and neighbors. Employees at the grocery store, moved by what they'd witnessed, shared the story online. Social media lit up with posts praising Keanu's kindness, and soon, news outlets picked up the tale. Headlines like "Keanu Reeves buys home for 90-year-old grocery cart collector" dominated feeds, sparking conversations across the country. People marveled not only at Keanu's actions, but also at the humility with which he carried them out. Despite the growing attention, Keanu refused interviews and avoided publicizing his involvement. When reporters tried to reach him, he politely declined, redirecting their focus to Harold instead. "This isn't about me," Keanu told one persistent journalist. "It's about honoring someone who deserves recognition far more than I ever will." Inspired by Keanu's example, strangers began reaching out to offer their own support. Some donated money to organizations helping seniors in need. Others volunteered at nursing homes or organized fundraisers for elderly individuals struggling financially. A group of high school students even launched a campaign called Carts for Care, collecting shopping carts left in parking lots and donating the proceeds to senior welfare programs. What had started as one man's act of kindness blossomed into a movement, reminding countless people of the power of compassion. Back at the grocery store, Harold's absence was deeply felt, but not in a sad way. Employees often spoke fondly of him, sharing stories about his kindness and work ethic. One cashier set up a bulletin board near the entrance, filling it with photos and notes celebrating Harold's legacy. Customers frequently stopped to write, messages of gratitude, expressing how Harold's quiet determination had inspired them to appreciate the little things in life. For Harold, the changes brought a mix of emotions. There were moments of nostalgia, when he missed the rhythm of collecting carts and the familiar faces at the store. But these feelings were outweighed by gratitude for the newfound stability, the friendships he'd forged, and the chance to live his final years with dignity and purpose. One evening, as Harold sat on his porch watching the sunset, Keanu joined, him carrying 2 cups of tea. They sat in companionable silence for a while, enjoying the cool breeze and the golden hues painting the sky. "You know," Harold said finally, breaking the quiet, "I used to think my story was over, that I'd lived my life, done my part, and now it was time to fade away. But you showed me that there's always another chapter waiting to be written." Keanu smiled, raising his cup in a silent toast. "Your story's far from over, Harold. In fact, I think the best parts are yet to come." Harold chuckled softly, his eyes glistening with tears. "Well, whatever happens next, I'm glad to have you around to share it with." As the stars began to twinkle above them, Keanu realized something profound. Helping Harold hadn't just changed the older man's life, it had changed his own, too. Through Harold, Keanu had been reminded of the beauty of human connection, the importance of listening, and the transformative power of kindness. And though the world might never fully understand the depth of their bond, it didn't matter. What mattered was that together, they had created something extraordinary, a beacon of hope in a sometimes dim world. The ripple effects of Keanu's kindness toward Harold began to spread far beyond what either of them could have anticipated. In a world often consumed by negativity, the story of a Hollywood star quietly transforming the life of an elderly man struck a chord with people everywhere. It wasn't just about the act itself, it was about the humanity behind it. People saw in Keanu's actions a reflection of something they longed for, a reminder that compassion still existed, even in its simplest forms. Social media played a pivotal role in amplifying the story. Photos of Harold standing proudly in front of his new yellow bungalow went viral, accompanied by heartfelt captions detailing his journey from hardship to hope. Strangers from all corners of the globe shared their thoughts, expressing admiration not only for Keanu but also for Harold's resilience and dignity. Comments poured in, ranging from, "This restores my faith in humanity," to, "If we all did one small thing like this, imagine how much brighter the world would be." Local news stations picked up the story next, interviewing employees at the grocery store who had known Harold for years. One cashier, tears streaming down her face as she spoke, described Harold as the hardest working man I've ever met. Another employee recalled how Harold always greeted customers with a smile, no matter how tired he seemed. These anecdotes painted a vivid picture of a man whose quiet strength had touched countless lives without him even realizing it. As the story gained traction, it sparked conversations about aging, poverty, and the challenges faced by seniors living on fixed incomes. Many viewers admitted they hadn't thought much about these issues before, but seeing Harold's situation reframed their perspective. Some began volunteering at senior centers or donating to organizations dedicated to supporting elderly individuals. Others reached out to older relatives they hadn't spoken to in years, inspired by the idea that even small gestures of connection could make a big difference. One particularly impactful initiative emerged from a group of college students in California. Inspired by Harold's former job collecting carts, they launched a campaign called Carts for Compassion. The project encouraged shoppers to return stray carts to designated areas rather than leaving them scattered around parking lots. For every cart returned, participating stores pledged to donate a portion of the savings to local charities helping seniors in need. Within weeks, the campaign spread to grocery chains across multiple states, raising thousands of dollars while fostering a sense of community responsibility. Meanwhile, Keanu continued to deflect attention away from himself. Despite the growing buzz surrounding his involvement, he remained steadfast in his belief that the focus should stay on Harold. When reporters showed up at his doorstep, he politely declined interviews, redirecting them to organizations working to improve the lives of seniors. "This isn't about me," he told one persistent journalist. "It's about celebrating someone who has given so much to others, often without asking for anything in return." Keanu's humility only added to the public's admiration. People began sharing stories of their own encounters with him. How he'd once bought a stranger's groceries, comforted a grieving fan, or simply taken the time to listen when someone needed it most. Each anecdote reinforced the image of a man who genuinely cared about making the world a better place, one person at a time. For Harold, the newfound attention was both heartwarming and overwhelming. He never imagined that his simple act of collecting carts would lead to such widespread recognition. At first, he worried that people might see him as weak or pitiable, but the opposite proved true. Instead, they celebrated his perseverance and grace under pressure. Strangers sent letters and care packages filled with books, blankets, and homemade treats. Neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves, eager to welcome him into the community. Even local businesses offered discounts or free services, wanting to contribute in some small way. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Harold remained grounded. He continued attending community events, joining book clubs, and tending to his backyard garden. His favorite pastime, however, became mentoring younger generations. Groups of high school and college students frequently visited his home, eager to hear his stories and learn from his wisdom. Harold spoke candidly about the lessons he'd learned throughout his life: the importance of hard work, the value of gratitude, and the power of resilience. "You know," Harold said during one such gathering, addressing a room full of wide-eyed teenagers, "I didn't think my life mattered much anymore. But then I realized something important. Your worth isn't measured by what you achieve or how much money you make. It's measured by the love you give and the kindness you show. If you can do that, if you can leave the world a little better than you found it, then you've done your part." His words resonated deeply with everyone present, sparking discussions that lasted long after the formal event ended. Teachers reported seeing noticeable changes in their students' behavior afterward. Acts of kindness became more common, bullying incidents decreased, and overall morale improved. It was as if Harold's message had ignited a spark within each young person, encouraging them to think beyond themselves and consider the impact of their actions on others. Even as Harold embraced his new role as a community figure, he refused to let go of the habits that defined him. Every now and then, he'd walk down to the grocery store and collect a few stray carts, not because he needed the money anymore, but because it gave him purpose. Employees greeted him warmly whenever he arrived, teasing him good-naturedly about not being able to retire completely. Harold laughed along with them, explaining that some things were too ingrained to abandon entirely. Keanu too noticed the positive changes in Harold's demeanor. During one of their regular visits, he remarked on how much happier and healthier Harold seemed compared to when they first met. "You're glowing, Harold," Keanu joked, handing him a plate of freshly baked cookies. Harold chuckled, brushing off the compliment. "Maybe I am, but it's not just me. It's everything around me. This house, the friends I've made, the kids who come visit. It's like I've been given a second chance at life, and I owe so much of that to you." Keanu shook his head firmly. "No, Harold, you did this yourself. All I did was give you the tools. You're the one building the masterpiece." Their friendship continued to flourish, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They spent hours talking about everything from movies and music to politics and philosophy. Sometimes they simply sat together in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's company. For Keanu, these moments were precious, a reminder of the profound connections that could form between two people from vastly different walks of life. As the months passed, the story of Harold and Keanu became a symbol of hope and inspiration. Schools incorporated it into lesson plans, teaching children about empathy and the importance of looking out for one another. Community leaders cited it as proof that individual actions, no matter how small, could create waves of change. And families gathered around dinner tables discussing how they could follow Keanu's example by reaching out to those in need. Through it all, Harold remained humble, insisting that he was just an ordinary man who'd gotten lucky. But to those who knew him, or even heard his story, he was anything but ordinary. He represented resilience, dignity, and the enduring power of the human spirit. And thanks to Keanu's selfless act, Harold's legacy would live on, inspiring countless others to carry the torch of kindness forward. In a world that often felt divided and uncertain, their story served as a beacon of light, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest times, there are still good people doing good things. And sometimes all it takes is one moment, one decision, one person willing to step up and say, "Let me help." Months had passed since Harold moved into his new home, and life had settled into a comforting rhythm. The yellow bungalow, once just a dream whispered in fleeting moments of hope, had become the heart of Harold's world, a sanctuary filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Each morning he woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden patterns on the walls. He'd brew himself a cup of tea, step out onto the porch, and watch the neighborhood come alive. Birds chirped cheerfully, children played in nearby yards, and neighbors waved as they walked by. For the first time in years, Harold felt truly at peace. The garden he'd planted in the backyard was thriving, much to his delight. Rows of herbs, basil, mint, rosemary, grew alongside vibrant flowers that attracted butterflies and bees. Harold spent hours tending to the plants, finding solace in the simple act of nurturing something. It reminded him of his younger days, when he and his late wife would spend weekends gardening together, dreaming of the future. Now, as he watered the soil or plucked fresh leaves for cooking, those memories came flooding back, not with sadness, but with gratitude for the life they had shared. Harold's newfound friendships enriched his days in ways he hadn't anticipated. Every Tuesday evening he attended a book club meeting at the local library, where lively discussions about literature often spilled over into conversations about life. On Thursdays, he joined a group of seniors for coffee and board games at the community center, and on Sundays he hosted informal gatherings at his house, inviting neighbors over for potluck dinners. These connections gave him a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in decades, filling his home and his heart with joy. Keanu remained a constant presence in Harold's life, visiting whenever he could. Their bond had grown stronger with time, evolving into a friendship that felt more like family. Keanu admired Harold's wisdom and resilience, while Harold appreciated Keanu's humility and genuine care. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection, each learning from the other in profound ways. One afternoon, as they sat together on Harold's porch, Keanu asked, "Do you ever miss collecting carts?" Harold thought for a moment, before answering. "Not really," he said with a chuckle. "But I do go down there sometimes just to say hello to the staff and grab a few stray ones. Old habits die hard, you know. Besides, it keeps me connected to the place where my journey began." Keanu nodded, understanding completely. "That's what makes you remarkable, Harold. You've embraced change without losing sight of who you are. Not everyone can do that." Harold smiled softly, leaning back in his chair. "Well, I couldn't have done any of this without you. You gave me a second chance, Keanu. A real one, and I'll never forget that." Keanu shook his head modestly. "I didn't give you anything you didn't already deserve. All I did was clear the path. You're the one walking it." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, the weather, upcoming holidays, and plans for Thanksgiving dinner, but the underlying gratitude between them lingered. It was a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd both come and the unbreakable connection they'd forged. As the seasons changed, so did the impact of their story. Inspired by Harold and Keanu's example, communities across the country began organizing initiatives aimed at supporting seniors. In Los Angeles, volunteers started delivering meals to elderly residents who struggled to cook for themselves. In Chicago, a program called Adopt a Neighbor paired young professionals with older adults, fostering intergenerational friendships. In small towns and big cities alike, people found creative ways to make a difference, proving that even small acts of kindness could spark monumental change. Schools incorporated Harold's story into their curriculums, teaching students about empathy, perseverance, and the importance of giving back. Teachers reported seeing noticeable shifts in behavior among their pupils, who became more compassionate and eager to help others. Parents noticed similar changes at home, with children offering to assist neighbors or volunteering for community service projects. The ripple effect of Harold and Keanu's bond had touched countless lives, reminding everyone of the power of human connection. For Harold, the most rewarding part of his new life was the opportunity to inspire others. He frequently spoke at events, sharing his experiences and encouraging people to find strength in adversity. His message was simple yet profound. No matter how difficult life may seem, there is always hope. There are always good people willing to lend a hand if you let them. And above all, it's never too late to start anew. One particularly memorable event took place at a senior living facility in Santa Monica. Harold stood before an audience of residents, many of whom were dealing with loneliness or health challenges. As he spoke about his own struggles and triumphs, tears glistened in the eyes of listeners. When he finished, a woman in her 80s approached him, clutching his hand tightly. "You've given us hope," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for showing us that we're not alone." Harold hugged her gently, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "None of us are alone," he replied. "We just need to remind each other of that sometimes." By the end of the year, Harold's story had become a symbol of resilience and renewal. News outlets revisited the tale, highlighting the positive changes it had sparked. Social media campaigns continued to gain momentum, with hashtags like DAS, Be Like Keanu, and Asirn Help Like Harold trending globally. People posted photos of their own acts of kindness, tagging friends and challenging them to pay it forward. What had begun as a single gesture of generosity had blossomed into a movement, inspiring millions to take action in their own communities. Through it all, Keanu stayed true to his humble nature. Though he occasionally acknowledged the impact of his decision, he consistently redirected praise toward Harold and the countless individuals who had followed their lead. "This isn't about one person," he told an interviewer during a rare appearance. "It's about recognizing the goodness in everyone and encouraging it to grow. If my actions inspired even one person to help someone else, then I've done my job." As the calendar turned to a new year, Harold reflected on how much his life had transformed. He thought about the hardships he'd endured, the loss of loved ones, the years of struggle, the loneliness that had threatened to consume him. But instead of dwelling on pain, he chose to focus on gratitude for the friends he'd made, the opportunities he'd been given, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. On New Year's Eve, Keanu joined Harold for a quiet celebration at the bungalow. They shared a homemade meal, laughed over old stories, and watched fireworks light up the night sky. As the clock struck midnight, Harold raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "and to the people who remind us that life is worth living." Keanu clinked his glass against Harold's, smiling warmly. "To you, Harold, to kindness, and to the endless possibilities ahead." In that moment, surrounded by warmth and light, Harold knew he had finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Not wealth or fame, but purpose. His journey had been long and arduous, but it had led him here, to a place of love, connection, and hope. And as he looked at Keanu sitting beside him, he realized something else. The greatest gift wasn't the house or the security. It was the reminder that humanity, at its core, was built on compassion. Years later, when people talked about Harold and Keanu, they wouldn't just remember the act of kindness that brought them together. They would remember the ripple effect it created, the countless lives touched, the communities strengthened, and the belief that even in the darkest times, there was still light to be found. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to notice, one person to care, and one person to act. And in doing so, they can change the world one heart at a time.